So once again, thank you everybody for joining us to celebrate our nation rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement and recognizing this as a critical step in combating climate change. This is also an opportunity for us to celebrate the bright, sustainable future ahead. Everyone has said this, but I'm going to say it once again. 2020 was rough, and I know that's a gross understatement. While things got incredibly dark and seemed hopeless at times, one thing kept me going through all of this, and that was the light produced by individuals continuously fighting for a more sustainable and equitable future. I found inspiration and was empowered by individuals and organizations continuously fighting the good fight to create the change we need to see in the world, even amongst such daunting barriers. Right here in Colorado, in this community here tonight, I saw that fight taking place. So beyond the climate agreement, I also want tonight to be a celebration of efforts taken by each and every one of you and our greater sustainability community to rally against the darkness and actualize a brighter tomorrow. If we were all in person, I would have us give one another a round of applause. So I'll go ahead and applaud all of you right now. Thank you for all of your efforts. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening. Sonrisa Lucero is an incredible and inspiring member of our Alliance Center board. She's a sustainability strategist at Denver Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. Marcel McClinton, who is our other speaker for this evening, ran for Houston City Council at the age of 17. He is now working as the Civic Futures Liaison at PeaceJam here in Colorado. In our networking portion of this event, Sonrisa and Marcel will both host breakout rooms, so you'll have the opportunity to ask them your questions at that time. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to our speakers for this evening.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Like you heard, my name is Marcel McClinton, originally from Houston, Texas, where I did run for Houston City Council in my senior year of high school. I took a gap year before my freshman year of college. And what motivated me to do that was I had been active in the gun violence prevention movement for a couple of years. I had been interested in civics. I had served on our mayor's gun violence task force, where we researched the issue of gun violence and what policies we could take or enact locally and push, at the state and federal level. And then I was inspired to run because there was a guy who was a GOP bail bondsman and climate change denier who currently serve in that role. And we made a statement to the city. We increased voter turnout. We pushed him into a runoff for the first time in his career. When people thought that we couldn't raise any money as this outsider candidate, we came in second, right behind him. We raised only $50,000 less than he did, and he'd been in office for 6 years. And so what I'm really excited about in my work is engaging youth. I do now through PeaceJam as their civic engagement liaison. I'm excited to be here today and talk about our rejoining of the Paris Climate Agreement. I'm excited to talk to you, Sonrisa.
Thanks, Marcel. It's so exciting, and I'm honored to share this virtual stage with you. This is going to be a blast. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. My name is Sonrisa Lucero. I'm with the City and County of Denver's Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency, and was formerly in the Office of Sustainability with Jerry Tinianow, who will be doing our toast later. And let's see, I really got interested in sustainability when I was in 6th grade, and environmental educators, so shout out for environmental educators that visit schools, came to our class and brought a jar with something that looked kind of foggy, but you couldn't see anything in there. And I was just like intrigued. I was like, what is in that jar? And later they explained that it was the brown cloud that we were experiencing quite a bit in Denver in the 80s. And ever since then, I've been hooked on environmental activism and protectionism, especially growing up here in Colorado with our mountains as our backyard and grandparents that would take me camping and fishing. And so I really got into the global warming side of things, and relevant to this conversation, when I was in college, the Kyoto Protocol was happening right about that time. And I designed my own degree actually to address climate change. And it was in the School of Engineering at Stanford. It mixed policy and economics and energy resources together as a way of doing that. When I came back, back home after college, I actually went into engineering, trying to make buildings more energy efficient, and then transitioned into sustainability consulting for buildings, making them more sustainable overall, before I finally got to, satisfy that policy itch that I had and move over to the city and county of Denver and work in the mayor's office on local sustainability policy. And so, yeah, with that, I am looking forward to our conversation, and I really want to maybe jump in with you, Marcel, if that's okay. Maybe
Yeah,
I'll pitch a question over to you. Something I learned about you that I thought was incredibly inspiring, and I think that our audience should know, is that you were not just the survivor of, but also the protector during a shooting that was happening outside of your parish as a young man, and 14 years old, and you were protecting preschoolers that you were teaching at Sunday school. And that's what really inspired your passion for working on preventing gun violence. That is definitely a sense of urgency that I can understand. Tell me how that's translating maybe into climate and environmental movement. What kind of urgency are you feeling now? And how should youth be taking a part of our next step of climate action?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, 2016, I was 14 years old at church, and a gunman with an AR-15 went on a rampage for an hour in the front parking lot. And then I sat in the front lobby with like 8 other people. We watched him pace our parking lot, and listening to this police scanner. I heard that my friend who lives in the neighborhood across the street was actually shot through her car door. And I, at the same time, was teaching Sunday school class, and we had to lock the building down. And we had never talked about locking down our place of worship, or what we would do, on a Sunday morning if we were worshiping and someone brought a gun into the building. We had never thought of those possibilities. And so it was after that I felt compelled, and especially following, just that year and the year after that, we had the Pulse nightclub shooting. There was a shooting in San Bernardino, California, one at like a YouTube building, and then there was a Parkland school shooting, and so many in between that don't make the news. But I felt drawn to action, and started working with local organizations, statewide and national organizations, and was lobbying for gun reform in Texas, which is an interesting place to lobby for gun reform if you've ever been to Texas. And what I realized was all of these issues that I'm passionate about are so interconnected, and that we had to really present this as a package to Texas lawmakers, and probably to the folks in DC too, because what we found was, if I lobby a Republican state official, and I'm just trying to poke their emotional strings, that's not going to work. If I just talk about how many people are being shot and killed in Texas every year by guns that are not stored safely, that's not going to work. But if I talk about the impact that gun violence has on our hospital systems and the healthcare system, and where the state comes in and has to then fund billions of dollars to the hospitals for folks who were shot and don't have healthcare because we're the highest uninsured rate in the country, then they listen because they want to save the state money. But I also know that, we can't be safe from gun violence and then ignore that we may not have a planet to live on, or a planet to push for safer gun laws. So it's kind of hard, I think, as a young activist to, kind of prioritize, well, do I want a planet in 10 years, or do I want to not be shot when I go to the movie theater post-pandemic world? And that sucks that we have to juggle those ideas. But I'm of the belief that I can walk and chew gum at the same time, and I can research and be passionate about a lot of issues all at once because I don't have a choice but to do that. So that answers your question. I'm interested in learning more about your background and professional work. I want to hear about your first organizing experience that you remember, and what drew you to specifically start bridging the gap between Latinx communities and the climate movement.
Yeah, thank you. So it's kind of funny to be asked like my first organizing experience, because I grew up in a family of activists. I mean, my parents were always pushing for equality, social justice. I would grow up with stories of them like taking over buildings at their university and things like that. And I was always like aspiring to take over a building in college, because I was like, I haven't lived up to their, standard until I've done that. But so my youngest movements were probably as a young person. The probably first one was in high school. I was organizing them. I organized us to recycle at our big events and things. And I would actually collect all of the recycling in the back of my grandfather's like 1969 Chevy. And I would drive it over to Canland, for those of you that are from Denver, and, sell it. It was only cans at the time. And then I would donate the money back to our student council. And so that was probably like my first efforts of recycling, or of kind of some activism efforts. But the one that where I really cut my teeth on organizing and the strategy behind it and how to make it worthwhile was when I was in college. And I was actually on the student body, so I was a senator. And the activists on campus at that time were working for a living wage for the janitors at the hospital that was affiliated with Stanford. And it was really interesting for me to really try and balance that inside versus outside relationship. So I was like in student government, very much 100% in agreement with the work of the activists about, the activist groups that, the more radical groups at the time, like Mecha, and they formed even a multicultural group that advocated at the exact same time, or specifically for that issue. And so while I agreed with them, I was trying to figure out, how do I support from my position in student government? And it was really kind of this like first lesson on working from the inside versus working from the outside. And a lot of that strategy is something that I bring with me now, even working in city government, where it's like, I totally am in alignment and agreement on our values and our ethics. And how do I bring that to transform this system that is designed to move slowly, to not necessarily bring in these, to prioritize these other interests that I might care about mostly. I think that was like a really valuable balance. To the second half of your question, it's really interesting. It's only been in the last couple of years that I've really been advocating for equity, full-throated, in a very strong, direct, passionate way. And part of that was because at first it was, especially in my engineering world, I was in very much a white male world, and a lot of it was seeming taboo. And to some extent, I wanted to be seen for my skills and my abilities as an engineer, and not for my race. And I was trying to excel as an engineer that was Latina, and like, so that was like my passion, right? And then a lot of my social activism work or my equity work would always be more on my own personal time. But it has become so blaringly clear that we can't separate these issues anymore, and we have to be able to show up as our whole selves wherever we go anymore. And so the demands of equity, demands of climate justice are such that they merit their own stage, they merit their own place. And it's really important that I bring my voice and those opinions in at the same time, and finally my whole self in my work. And so really been trying to do that, though that is a challenge too, because oftentimes a lot of the equity work falls on the people of color within an organization, and it is an emotional burden, and there's like, there's a lot of different feelings that you go through at different times as you take that on. And so I've been cautious how much I take on, but that's a big part of it. for sure. You know, something that was really interesting that you brought up, it just in your last comment, you know, I was kind of speaking about like the emotional burden of working on equity as a person of color. Like, I'm impressed, like astounded, amazed, worried about young people today, because there are so many very serious issues that are happening, you know, in the world that are pressuring, that are a lot for adults, even, right? Like older adults, you know, then especially for young people. Um, so I wonder, like, how are you, and especially having survived a shooting, or you know, that kind of thing, and how are people in your age group like maintaining your mental health, your emotional health, your well-being, and I also have to say that I am just amazed by all of you, and how, or many of you, the ones I've interacted, that are pushing all the rest of us to be better, um, even in the face of all of this, you know.
I I'm smiling because I feel like I get that question a lot, and then never end up knowing how to answer it um, in a good way, in a healthy way. So I after yesterday, I slept better than I have slept in 4 years last night. I didn't wake up in the middle of the night. I woke up feeling refreshed, like, you know, it was just great. And I'm sure that was a lot of people also. Um, I didn't even want to check like if Joe had tweeted over the night. You know, he didn't rage tweet at 2 a.m. It was wonderful. Um, so I'm optimistic about self care in the movement improving over this next 4 years, because if anything, this has been a cultural reset, and this is like, you know, climate change will not be solved in a Biden administration, but we can get closer to getting something productive done in these next 4 years, and that is what gives me hope. But what's important that I have to run, that I was always reminded whenever I ran for city council, and was traveling the country lobbying on bills, talking to survivors of gun violence who traumas become your own trauma, and you share that with them. Is, you know, I used to be really anti therapy. I thought that after my shooting, I thought that, you know, I didn't want to pay someone to listen to my problems. But it was after I became so overwhelmed with the weight of other people's stories and traumas, and thinking about just the US and fascism breeding here and all over the world, got into a really dark place. And then while I was running for city council, I was driving on the road, and I suffer from migraines that happened after the shooting in 2016. I was driving and my vision went completely white. I had a migraine, but I couldn't see anything. And I was able to pull over and then called a doctor, an eye doctor, because I thought my eyes were ruined. I went in to see them. Everything checked out. My eyes were normal, 20/20 vision. And then she just asked if I do anything that causes me great stress. I was like, well, everything that I do causes me a lot of stress. I don't do anything that doesn't cause me stress. And that was like a wake-up call to me that I have to take care of myself. I have to eat 3 meals a day. I have to drink 10 glasses of water every day. I have to sleep, and then schedule that into my calendar. I have to schedule time for me to do nothing in my day. So I encourage everyone else to do the same thing. I think this is going to be our last question coming up. But I was genuinely moved by your TED Talk, where you spoke about the need to integrate our work with the communities that have historically suffered the effects of environmental injustice and will carry those larger burdens as climate change inevitably targets their homes. My follow-up is kind of interesting. As you know, I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, which is a city known as the energy capital of the world. And my old neighborhood was the energy corridor, which is full of oil and gas companies. We're a place that often focuses on accessibility to jobs. We're projected to have a majority Latino population by just next year. And I'm curious, how do you get people from places like my neighborhood to recognize that those jobs are currently and will be available in energy industries absent of oil and pollutant gases? Because I think what's really important is getting folks who used to deny climate change existed. We now know that it does exist. how do we get them on board with us to realize that even the Paris Agreement is not enough?
Yeah, thanks. Not an easy question at all, but um, there's a couple of things, right? I think the first thing that we're here to celebrate, right, because of hope, and I think that's one really great mental health thing for myself too, is like having something to build toward and to look forward to. And I'm going to try and maybe capture a few different uh, I think elements are important that we talk about tonight because we are, as we run down on time here, as well as answer your question. And the when we left the Paris Climate Accord, it actually had almost a little bit of the opposite effect, right? Like than what Trump and the far right would have thought. Instead of like shutting down renewable energy or energy efficiency, it actually like spurred it quite a bit because it meant that local governments and businesses and even individuals adopted this issue as their own and integrated it within their own systems. And so in a way, it was almost like a positive thing for us on the US side because it got us moving in the ways that the federal government really can't do, right? And so like the feds can't do everything on the centralized side. And so on the decentralized side, we all mobilized. And so it was super exciting and motivating on that. And I feel like that has been a major theme that I've been hearing in the last just weeks and maybe a month or a couple of months about how it's so hackneyed now, right? But it's like be the change you want to see in the world. And I think so much of that has been like coming down, like it's been kind of represented in a different way where it's like we can't wait anymore for these larger, bigger pieces to move. We have to control the pieces that we can here locally and go for it. So in that sense, I'm super excited that that happened and that it's probably going to continue to happen and needs to continue to happen. But what does this mean for the US and Colorado, at least, which is also an energy producing state, is what we used to think about, we think about this with city government, or at least, I used to think about this with Jerry a lot. We sit around and be like, okay, what are the levers that we actually have, right? We have funding, we have tax dollars that we can spend, we have laws that we can make for the things that we actually govern. We can use our bully pulpit that we have as the mayor's office or, as the city to communicate things out. And we can use our power of convener. Right. And so all of those things are same at the federal level with addition of maybe like trade, right? Like they have all the trade laws and things like that. And so, the things that I'm looking forward to from kind of a Biden administration is one, that centralized organization on things that we can't necessarily do as individuals. So it's going to be kind of that, things on the level of the Clean Power Plan, right? So like, how do we go back into regulating in power plants and industries on that level? What do we do back with the CAFE standards and bring those back? They're definitely talking about pushing for the rebates again for energy efficiency and now for the innovation side, they're wholly adopting electrification of transportation. There's a whole push for public transportation now, which I think is going to be really exciting, where the feds can come in and help any city over 100,000 people on the public transportation side. There's a big effort on carbon sequestration and innovation and research on that. And then there's probably going to be a larger effort even on just innovation R&D for renewable energies and storage and so on. So all of those things give me hope. And when you get into those areas, you start to finally get into the areas beyond just the energy efficiency jobs, which are kind of the $50,000 to $80,000, a year kind of salaried positions. And you can start getting into the high tech positions of energy storage, of carbon sequestration, of integrating these big systems. And those are the jobs that, are the high paying jobs that potentially can compete with the high paying jobs of oil and gas, right? And the problem is that so much of the oil and gas jobs are the lifeblood for rural areas. And so the real question that we're going to have to answer is how can we get some of that high paying stuff back into the rural areas as well, or being able to create a funding stream for them. It's not necessarily even that the jobs are there, but it's which they are in many cases, but also you have the royalties that go back to those areas, right? And so it's like, how do you supplant, that kind of funding for local governments and so on? And so there's a lot there. I think oil and gas areas have opportunities for methane capture. I think ag areas have areas for carbon sequestration. And what you hear on Biden's page and for his plan is just jobs, 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 jobs. And so it's all going to play out, and we'll see. But I think I think the main fears that people have is going to cost too much and it's going to cost people jobs, right? And so I think if we can allay those fears and start to prove that, we'll get there. And I took up a lot of time to say that, but anyway, I thought I should bring a little bit of this to the Paris Agreement before we start signing off. And then my last maybe question for you too, to kind of round things out for us, is like, what do you see the role of youth going forward, or what do you want the role of youth for? You as one young person get to speak on behalf of all young people.
All youth.
But what do you want, you and your peers at least to be able to do,
Yeah, I really think that young people at this time in our history, we can go back 2 or 4 years ago, when I think that there was this collective wake-up call, and not just in Colorado, not just in the US, but really all over the world. I mean, March for Our Lives and the climate strike, these were global actions where millions of young people primarily are engaged and organizing on their, in their elementary schools and after school, and their sports teams and their choirs and their college campuses. I think that we've bred a generation of organizers, which excites me, because I think that when organizers are in positions of power after they, climb in their careers, that I think organizers are the best people to run companies, to run our government, to represent people. And I really hope that young people are able to, if aside from pushing policy, getting laws passed, mobilizing more youth and to bring them into the electoral process, I hope that we as a generation are able to kind of rebirth the fight and everyone who's older than us. I think that we bring energy that is unmatched and that has been unmatched and will be unmatched by anyone else. I'm gonna just claim that Gen Z wins, but I think that we really have a duty to continue to inspire people who may have been in this fight for 10, 15, 20, 30 years and are just so drained. We have to help people understand and realize that we're not done fighting. We're not going to allow you to give up just because you've been in the trenches for decades. We want to, give this new energy and this new wave across our communities and across the world. So thank you so much, Sonrisa, for that question and for this conversation. I hope everyone watching enjoyed that. I'm pretty sure I tossed this back to Shay. Is that not what happens?
Yes, no, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Marcel. So thank you so much, Marcel and Sonrisa, for that conversation. We really appreciate both of you being here and find each of you to be so inspiring for all that you do and for your incredible backgrounds. Next, I'd like to introduce Jerry Tinianow, who is doing our toast for this evening. He was the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City and County of Denver for 7 years and is the second person to sign up for the Alliance Center's brand new membership program. So way to go here. We're so honored to have him here tonight, and this is the perfect time to go ahead and grab your drinks, so you'll be able to toast. With that, I'll hand it off to Jerry.
Yeah, thanks, Shay. Everybody fill your glasses up, have them ready, because I'm going to get to the toast in just a couple of minutes. I also I've been monitoring the participants, and there's so many participants that I know. I wish I could talk to each of you individually tonight, but it's really gratifying that you've joined us here. 4 years ago, our sustainability community was worried We were worried that everything we had worked on for decades was about to be undone. The US was heading out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. And when asked about this at public events, my response was always the same. I did not think that the Trump administration could undo our work. Sustainability had come too far. And thanks to all of our efforts, mine and yours, sustainability had become the dominant culture in the United States. Trump was just too late. Yes, we would have preferred to have friends in the White House, but we had become so strong that we could continue our progress regardless. And I told people that history would remember Trump as just a kind of a rock in the surf. You know, we were a rising tide, and like any tide, we would crash over that rock and move beyond it. We did know, however, that for the next 4 years, at least at that point, we could no longer count on the feds. Local governments everywhere needed to step up and become leaders in this struggle for climate justice. And that's exactly what happened. As Sonrisa mentioned, cities, counties, villages, and towns across this country learned that they could lead and succeed even without federal climate justice allies. Now, here along the Front Range, we set a standard for climate justice work that has become a model for our nation. Whether it's our rating system as a LEED Platinum city or our place on CDP's A-list of top performing climate change cities worldwide, Denver has set a high bar. Well, we did that thanks in part to the leadership of our host tonight, the Alliance Center, and in part to all of your collective ingenuity, hard work, passion, and collaboration. You know, I've been so fortunate to work with many of you and to watch you succeed. Ours is truly a community of climate justice leaders. Today, we have friends in the White House again. And boy, do I love saying that, and I'm sure you do too. But if you have rose-colored glasses on, pull them off. The Trump administration has left a mess behind. And our friends, those friends we have again in the White House, they have huge problems completely outside of climate change competing for their attention. Local leadership is just as important today as it was 4 years ago. But now we have 4 years of experience and achievement behind us, and we have the self-confidence that goes with that. We should tell the Biden-Harris administration that they can and they should lean on us. Let's partner together to get climate justice done. So if you will, raise your glass, whether it's real or virtual, for a toast. To our Colorado climate justice community, on this happy day when our country has rejoined the family of nations in the pursuit of climate justice, let's celebrate. But let's not slow down. Let's double down. Let's commit to do even more. Salute. Wonderful.
You have to cheers with me.
Oh.
Great sound effect. So much more satisfying. Thank you, Jerry, for toasting not to the end of our work, but to the beginning. Now I'd like to provide each of you with actions you can take with the Alliance Center to promote sustainability and combat climate change through our Take 5 campaign. During our networking portion this evening, we'll have breakout rooms aligned with each of these areas. So number 1, make your home or workplace a living laboratory. Whether it's learning more about LEED certification, using our team's green building expertise, or diverting waste, there are a variety of ways that you can make your home or building more sustainable. 2, support local companies who are committed to doing business better. You can support one of the Alliance Center's Best for Colorado companies or encourage other businesses to become one. Either way, you're supporting people who use business as a force for good. 3, accelerate a regenerative recovery Colorado. Your organization or you as an individual can join our Regenerative Recovery Coalition. Or if you've already joined, you can sign up for a working group or explore our resources on regenerative recoveries. 4, You can join the Alliance Center's influential community, whether it's becoming a tenant in our collaborative building, hosting an in-person or virtual event with us, or becoming a member of the brand new Alliance membership. There are a variety of ways that you can deepen your connections in Colorado's sustainability community. And 5, you can support the Alliance Center. We cannot accomplish all of our great work without all of your ongoing support. You can learn more about how to take action with the Alliance Center and our Take 5 campaign at thealliancecenter.org/take5. As I mentioned, we will have breakout rooms that highlight each of the Take 5 action areas, along with the room with Marcel and another with Sonrisa. Our networking portion will last about 20 minutes. After 10 minutes, we strongly encourage you switch to a new table so you can meet new people and explore a different sustainability area. This will also give other people an opportunity to join the room you're in. Once we break out into separate rooms, you might be automatically pushed into a specific session, but don't worry. You can choose a different room if you'd like. Just use the PDF instructions that I'm including in the chat right now. If you need help transferring to a room, you can send a direct message in Zoom to Kelby Johnson, event coordinator for the Alliance Center, and she can put you at a specific happy hour table. After 20 minutes of networking, this event will end and the Zoom session will close. Before we finish up and go to our breakout rooms for networking, I want to thank Serendipity Catering for the Paris-themed baskets that they created for this event, and to Mondovino, who provided the champagne many of you enjoyed this evening. It was wonderful working with both of these companies. Also, if you loved the way this event was run, a lot of that was a result of the amazing hard work of our events team at the Alliance Center. They offer virtual events consulting and can help you with your next event. Just visit thealliancecenter.org/virtual events to learn more. Finally, I want to say thank you again to everyone for being here this evening. One thing we know is that going back to Paris is not the end of our efforts combating climate change. It's the beginning. This is not the time to relax and ease up. It's the time when the real work begins. So let us continue working together to create the light, hope, and action this world needs. Thank you for being here this evening and enjoy networking with this amazing community.